Hi, everyone. As Ray said, my name is Anika, and I am super thrilled to be with all of you here and with the Hacking HR community tonight. I'm not going to talk about the gig economy or the future of work, but if you want to talk more about that later, I'm super into it. I'm curious. I want to talk to you guys about talent assessments here. So who here uses talent assessments in their job, or the company uses talent assessments? Anyone? Just barely a few. Who here knows about them and hates them, thinks they're terrible? Cool, that's fair. Who here doesn't ever even think about them? It's just like not on your mind, you're not even sure what I'm talking about. Okay, nobody, cool. So the top of this slide, it says, I hear HR professionals all the time talk about putting the human back in human resources. I say it, I care deeply about humans, but I'm here to say, no, I want to reduce the human in human resources. Yes, I realize I'm talking to a human resources audience. But there is a really good reason, and I say reduce, not get rid of altogether, and that is, this says we are flawed. So we humans are imperfect, as Ray mentioned. We bring a lot of biases to the table, especially the recruiting and hiring department. We bring affinity bias, racial bias, gender bias, first impression bias. I mean, there's a dozen others that we bring to the table. And it has a big impact on our recruiting. And these biases can make you like someone more, they can make you like someone less, but all of that data is not relevant to whether they're going to be good at their job, and it's not helpful in predicting performance. So the other reason why I want to reduce a little human is that our tools are also weak at predicting performance. This says resumes. Resumes are one of the greatest tools we have, but it turns out not that effective at predicting performance. People can write whatever they want and do. About 85% of employers have found fibs in resumes and applications. But also, they trigger those same biases I was talking about, particularly when it comes to names. In our little book, we mentioned a study about black-sounding names. But just in 2017, the University of Toronto did a study, and they found that names with Asian-sounding names, specifically Chinese, Pakistani, and Indian-sounding names, had a 28% less chance of getting shortlisted for the next round than Anglo-Saxon-sounding names. So 28% less. That's a huge barrier. And not just that type of bias, but also gender bias. Stanford did a study in 2014 where they sent out 100 resumes to STEM hiring managers, 100 resumes identical in format, every detail identical, except for half of those resumes had the name Jennifer, and the other half had the name John. What do you think happened? Jennifer was considered less competent, she was less likely to be hired as a manager, she was less likely to want to be mentored, and on average, they suggested she should get paid 13% less than John. And these are things we're bringing to the table unconsciously. These are scientists who think of themselves as objective, and even they are not able to kind of remove this bias from their process. This says interviews are weak. Interviews are spectacular at finding people who are good at interviewing. And so if your job includes being interviewed, please continue to rely on interviews for predicting performance. But if they don't, this is a great way to sell your company, but not the best way to figure out who's going to be great at the job. And just like resumes, they actually trigger some biases in us, particularly around physical appearance. So Ferry Godboss just did a survey to 500 hiring managers. They showed them a picture of an overweight woman and said, what is the likelihood you would hire this woman? What do you think, 90% would, 50%? Less than 16% would consider hiring her. Additionally, more than 20% characterized her as either lazy or unprofessional. These are things we're just bringing. We don't mean to, but we do. So we can't really rely on these tools because they bring our own flaws to the table, which is why I want to talk to you about assessments. So what this says at the top is cognitive assessments. Cognitive assessments are the type of tools that we can measure our ability to learn and solve problems. These aren't trivia tests. These are general mental ability tests. And we have known for 20 years that they're twice as good as an interview at predicting performance, 3 times as good compared to looking at experience, and almost 4 times as good compared to looking at education level. So we've known these are really good. But predicting learning skills and problem-solving skills are not the only thing that matters in hiring or retaining people. We all know that. Which brings me to the second type of assessment, which is really key, which is the behavioral assessment. This is oftentimes called the psychology test, or sometimes a personality test. Yes, some are better than others, and many of them in the past have been really terrible. The main reason is that they would usually put employees in the good box or the bad box. These are the people you want to hire, these are the people you don't want to hire, based on things like, oh, are they optimistic, or are they flexible? Turns out those are also not qualities required for every job. So modern assessments are great. They help us understand how employees can have a psychological fit for a job that they will love, a job that they will be good at, a job that they want to stay with, regardless of whether they are cognitively available for it. What's new about this is, for anybody who's familiar with assessments in the olden days, is you would have a consultant and you'd kind of assess your team, but it wouldn't have any alignment to jobs and it wouldn't be based on a lot of good data. And now we have 5-10 years of really great data where we can map a job or a role to an employee's specific psychological needs and their cognitive abilities. Whether it's a lab technician, which is different from an account manager, which is different from a developer, which is different from an HR manager. We can see this based on past experience, and that data is flowing into many different assessment companies, which is awesome. This is my favorite part of it, is the data. So if you want to think about using assessments in your business, you want to experiment with them, let me recommend 2 places that you do that. So this is the recruiting funnel. Oh, good, you can see it. I really recommend using assessments at the very top of the funnel. Before anybody at your company has seen a resume, seen a name, seen an alma mater, before their biases have been triggered, so that you can find who are going to be the top performers at the very top of your funnel. That's where you can actually contribute to reducing bias. Yes, you'll probably need to see a resume eventually, but you can scrub it. Yes, you'll probably want to do an interview, and you'll want to be careful there with structured interviews and scrubbing your resumes. But the other great place to use it is benchmarking your own talent. So all of that data available now is across industry, across the United States. You can actually benchmark your top performers and figure out how to replicate them. So there's a lot of technology in the business, but I really don't think that technology solves all of our problems. And I said at the top that I wanted to reduce the human and human resources, but only up to a point. And this is a place where humans really need to step in, which is we need to require our assessment companies and the people producing these tests have a way to make sure that their algorithms are not biased, and not only are they tested regularly, but rigorously for that. You also want to make sure that the assessment companies that you work with can combine cognitive and behavioral, because that's where you get the real punch up in terms of predictability. So I would like you all to use assessments. That would be my goal, to help reduce bias. I would like you to use them wisely, though. It's not a silver bullet. So it turns out I did assess myself. I am an extremely low fit for the accounting department. Don't let me in there. Also, you may be horrified to find out I'm barely a medium fit for HR generalist. Like, I am not even qualified to be in this room. But the good news is I am a decent fit for the job that I have, which is the president of a company. So thank you for your time.